This is the core of what this is about. This is always what it's about. It's about money, power, and the control of trade.
Traveling to a restrictive country with internet censorship? A VPN is the answer. And surf the internet with no restrictions.
This is an audio recording of an X Space courtesy of thecoinrepublic.com, the go-to place where you can keep up to date with what's happening in the crypto space. Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, good night, wherever you are, whenever you are. Welcome to the Crypto Pulse X Space courtesy of the Coin Republic. I'm thrilled to be joined by my friend and commentator, financial macroeconomic commentator par excellence, Tom Luongo. Now, I said this is a X Space courtesy of the Coin Republic. I usually do these once a week, usually on a Saturday, 5 o'clock UK time, sometimes on a Wednesday, 5 o'clock UK time. And this one is being recorded on Wednesday, the 24th of September. And it will go out on the Coin Republic website and their X feed. And it will also go out on my channels at some point. I am Crypto Rich. I am your host for today. Thank you so much for joining. And please follow the Coin Republic. Please also follow me, and of course, please follow Tom Luongo, as I suspect many of the listeners here already do. Now, nothing that I say or Tom says on this X Space should be taken as investment advice. You and you alone are responsible for any financial decisions that you make. Please do not sell your house, wife, husband, children, all your worldly goods, your bicycles, your underwear, in order to invest in any cryptocurrency or financial investment that we talk about here, or I ever talk about, or you ever hear online. Do your own due diligence. Check it out first. Okay, Tom, if you want to come off mute and introduce yourself, and just to acknowledge Tom. So one, I don't know why, but I'm really excited about having you on here as a guest, even though you
Really?
Yeah, yeah, it's really funny because you and I, we speak regularly, at least once
Yes,
a
we
month,
do.
sometimes twice. And
Mhm.
also, I can't see you, and you can't see me put my finger up to stop you. I'm just gonna have to interrupt you, all right?
Ah, that's funny. Yeah, just I'll keep the what do you call? I'll keep the interface. I'll just use the little hand wave thing recently, and I've gotten better at that. I don't do a lot of spaces, so but I'll try and keep my comments to a minimum. Hello, everybody. Thank you all for stopping by and supporting my good friend Rich over here with this.
Yes.
I wouldn't dream of telling him no unless I, sincerely didn't have the time or the space in my schedule to make it. So, um, Rich
Absolutely,
and I,
absolutely.
we've been what friends now? What going on almost 8 years?
And yeah, we've been recording on my channel on YouTube, BitChute,
Hmm.
ODYSEE, Rumble for
Right.
years now. Absolutely, and I've learned loads about you about about politics and macro politics and analysis, and I've also
Mhm.
learned loads about you from you about money and
Mhm.
big money. And I know you've been on before. I think you were my first guest when I
Mhm.
started hosting these in March. So I don't want to cover that old ground. Um, what I'd like you to do, with a
Mhm.
focus on, if you can, on cryptocurrencies, on Ripple, if you like, altcoin,
Mhm.
gold, money, silver, what do you think would be useful for people to know? But before you do that, where can people find you? And
Sure.
they really go hunt him out, go and find him.
You can follow me here on X/Twitter. I like dead naming it still. It's just too much fun at TFL 1728. Then of course there's the blog over tomluongo.me or goldgoatsandguns.com, where I don't write anymore, but I do post our regular publicly available podcast, as well as the link to the monthly newsletter every month, and of course Patreon/goldgoatsandguns, which is how myself and Dexter White make a living. So doing what we do, which is to try and provide what we think is the most cutting edge analysis that cuts across, that interesting intersection between, you know, economics, macroeconomics, geopolitics, and then a little bit of culture war stuff and all of that. We try to hit all of those things at the same time, and be both trenchant, forward looking, and entertaining. Because if you're not entertaining and you're not having fun, you're doing it wrong. So
Oh
that's what we
yes,
do.
absolutely. You're definitely entertaining. And full disclosure, I am a subscriber, and I get
Mhm.
Tom's bi-weekly newsletter, which often contains material that doesn't make it into the public space, but it's incredibly, incredibly useful. So I do recommend people go check him out. Okay, so Tom, where do you want to begin?
Uh, I mean, we should probably begin with Donald Trump going to the UN with two, I count them two, flaming bags of poop and then setting them up and shooting them out and shooting them with shotguns over the entire UN delegation yesterday. I think that speech was one for the ages. I will be honest with you. I've watched a lot of political speeches in my life. I think the most notable to me before that would be Putin's speech to the UN delegation, the UN General Assembly in 2015, just before he moved into Syria, asking, do you realize what you have done?
Yes,
Um,
I
and,
listened to that one. I remember that
yeah,
one still.
and right after that, Ayatollah Khamenei's speech, I think right after that was also very telling and very interesting. But Trump's speech yesterday was a full declaration of war against globalism and against the current version of globalism. And clearly, he knew he was speaking to an audience that was fully captured by this mind virus and this idea. Um, you know, we can argue as to which ones are willing accomplices and which ones are, kind of captured pawns and blink twice if you're under duress. Kind of, depending on the world leader you're talking about. But I think that that's the most important part of all this, and then how that interfaces with the cryptocurrency markets, gold, silver, and the future of money as a concept. That's a very interesting conversation. But the where I would start is to say, look, Trump has made it abundantly clear that the United States now operates for the United States, and that may be messy, and that may be counterintuitive, and that may be many, many things. But there's a clear and weird operation happening now, and I think the battle lines are being drawn very clearly, and I think the issue lines are being drawn very clearly, especially in geopolitics. And Rich, and you and I have been having this conversation about geopolitics for a long, long time, and I'll get to the money markets in just a second. But I have to make this point abundantly clear. I just got done literally recording my Wednesday market report that I do every Wednesday and every Sunday for my patrons, and I was making this point, which is that with all of these people, these various countries, and some of them are incredibly surprising, right? Recognizing the quote unquote Palestinian state. I find that interesting. I don't disagree with it. I don't agree with it. As a commentator, I could care less one way or the other, right? I find it strategically interesting because I think what it's done is it's thoroughly defined the battle space. Remember, Israel is the creation of the British Empire. Going all the way back, as our friend Alex Trainer likes to talk about, all the way back to the mid 19th century. So Israel for 150 years has been a British project, and the British project, of course, is for it to be a land-based aircraft carrier to control all the trade routes around the maritime trade routes around the Arabian Peninsula, which is incredibly important. The Mediterranean, the Arabian Peninsula, the Red Sea, all of that stuff, right? Bosphorus and Dardanelles, the Black Sea, all of it. It's the most important geographical area in the world when it comes to the old colonial powers of Europe, be they British or French or Portuguese or whomever. It doesn't really matter. So when you look at it from that perspective, and then you ask yourself, well, why are all these people now all of a sudden throwing Israel under the bus, advocating not just for two-state solution, but literally on the eve of Donald Trump going to speak at the UN? Why would they all suddenly announce out of nowhere that they now support a Palestinian state? This is, and recognize, not just support, but recognize a Palestinian state, which doesn't even exist. Right? How is this? How did we get here? Right? And many people can you make the argument, of course, it's because of Israel's deplorable behavior over the last 2 years, and I'm not going to sugarcoat that, but it's deeper than that. This is about, and I think we've gotten to that point now where it's about what I've always said about British politics mirroring Israeli politics. If we go back to Brexit, it seems that every time there's a move in British politics, we see a similar move in Israeli politics. Meaning, when we see a snap election in Britain, like within a couple of months, there's a snap election in Israel, and it goes back and forth and back and forth. And we've seen this now over a decade, the 9 years of since Brexit, and it's really clear to me now that I've always talked about it in these terms, and I've always understood that there are multiple factions within the Israeli political scene, and just like I understand there's multiple factions within the British political scene. And I think what it really comes down to at this point is that we've now seen the declaration of the fork in the road, right? That the old colonial powers of Europe plus their globalist faction within City of London, which I would put like Tony Blair at the head of, are clearly backing one version of reality, a version of a future. And that future is for them to control the new land-based aircraft carrier that controls the maritime sea routes around the Arabian Peninsula. And they're going to put that in Palestine. Previously, it had been the old British neoconservative, the remnant of the British Empire, with their friends in Washington controlling the land-based aircraft carrier in Israel. And all the other stuff, when you back everything else out, all the religious stuff, all of it, that's all just froth. That's all just icing on the cake. This is the core of what this is about, right? This is always what it's about. It's about money, power, and the control of trade and trade flows. And you could make the argument that, Donald Trump has been successful enough at this point of cutting off the Europeans and the Europeans themselves cutting themselves off from various sources of energy as they pick a fight with the Russians, that they have no other choice but to do that now. And so but was this always their move on the board? I think so. And I think it's always been, kind of on their, like I like to put their Microsoft project file, their Gantt chart over at Evil Corp Central, Davos, whatever you want to call them, like that's always been their plan. That they were going to push this to its breaking point. And with Queer Stalin, the Prime Minister of the UK, clearly working for them and having been placed in power to work for the old colonial powers of Europe and betray the old British neocons. By the way, neither of these groups are good. They both suck. They're both terrible, right? Objectively terrible people. They're both globalists. They're just globalists of a different variety. And so when you think of it like that, you then realize that they're just the representatives for upper management of the people who think they run the world, who are the ones that don't have Wikipedia pages and all the rest of it. And those guys are now arguing amongst themselves as to who's going to control the levers of power after this period is over. And everybody's making their move. And Trump is the guy in the middle, realizing that he has all the leverage. And so, and standing there saying, look, America doesn't stand for any of this anymore. And that's what he said when he went to the UN last night. He's like, look, the climate change is dumb. The invasions are dumb. You're losing your cultures. You're losing your countries. You're losing your people. Losing all of this stuff. And the reason I bring all of this up before I even begin to start talking about money is because ultimately now money has to decide who's going to win this conflict. And whoever they think is going to win is where the money's going to show up, is going to go to, right? And that's the big question. And I haven't even brought in the Russians and the Chinese yet, who I personally absolutely think are working with Trump to isolate Europe. And so with that said, we have to get away from the existing system of debt and debt slavery, and move towards a world of hard assets. And that's what the move towards crypto is. That's why gold is nearly $3,800 an ounce. That's why silver is breaking out towards 45. That's why even oil is finally starting to make a move, or at least basing, in the 65 to 68, $69 range, that the world is beginning to change. And the way we organize is based on how we're going to, handle capital going forward. And I think that world is changing at the same time as all these relationships are changing, and they all mirror each other. So that's a good start, I guess.
Okay. Well, what was key in there is your assertion that Russia, China, and the United States are working together, and how that is going to impact the world of money and resources and collateral. So first, given what Trump was saying, that we're going to attack, NATO and the Europe should attack Russia, Ukraine should take all its territory back, which is, I think he's trolling them and he's calling their bluff. And he's setting himself up to look like he supports them. How can you say that Russia and China and the US are working together?
Well, that's the thing. Like you nailed it right there. At the end of the day, he also said, I wish both countries well. I want the war to end. I'm happy to sell NATO their weapons so that NATO can go do whatever it is they're going to do, but we're not really going to be involved in this. He simultaneously puffed Zelensky up and puffed the the EU up and say, hey, if you want to go fight this war, we'll help you. Like, I mean, I guess, we'll sell you the weapons. I think, you guys owe us money, so I don't know how you're going to pay us, but, we'll sell you the weapons if you got the money. But, and I think, if you have our weapons, then yeah, you could probably push the Russians back. But if you look at what he's doing in every other aspect of the situation, what is he doing? He's normalizing, he's lifting sanctions against Belarus and Russian, some of the sanctions against Russia. He's saying, look, I want the war to end. I want peace to break out, and I'm willing to piss everybody off to get that done, including the Russians. I want this over and done with. This is dumb. We have people dying, and there's no reason for it. And it's all. And what he's trying to say to everyone is, they're all complicit at a certain level in the killing. And if they want the killing to stop, then they have to make their way forward with that. They have to actually put that on the table. And he knows full well that the Europeans are the ones pushing this war. He knows full well. That's why he struggles sessioning them at the White House, making them all mouth words for peace while they scheme for war. Not an hour later, and he's like, no. That's not the way this is going to work. So, you know, it's clearly. I mean, he wouldn't send American military advisors to Belarus to watch Russian Belarusian war games last week if he thought that this was going to be we weren't laying the groundwork for some kind of rapprochement, unless, of course, the Europeans are going to push this to their limit. But then they're going to have to get people to fight for them. And that's the big question here. People like Manny Macron, I refuse to call him Emmanuel anymore. He's just Manny. Manny and Ursula von der Steyen and Kaya Kallas and all of these horrible people, like Europeans in the audience, are you going to go fight for these people? This is the point my friend Ian Burlingame makes all the time. Are you going to go fight for them? No, you're not. So how are they going to, what are they going to do, press gang you into fighting their war for them the same way that Zelensky is press ganging everybody over the age of 16 or whatever, as they've changed the rules, or 18, whatever it is. Like, they're press ganging 50-year-old men into fighting for Ukraine. They wouldn't let Irina Zarutska's parents go and claim her body and go to her funeral because her father was military age eligible. Are you kidding me? How inhuman are you? Like, he knows all this. So it's like, what he has to do is prove to the world and prove to the American people that who the real warmongers are. He's got warmongers in the Senate. He's got warmongers in the House. He's got fake majorities in both the House and the Senate. He's trying to get all this done. And what Trump has to do is expose all of it. Expose the rotten grift everywhere. The war, the climate change, the invasion, the fentanyl trade, all of it. He has to expose it all as nothing but a big grift. And put it in front of the people who are supposedly the leaders of the world, the 200 plus members of delegations of the countries around the world. Here we are at the United Nations. That's what this place is supposed to be for. And none of you are doing that. None of you called me to say, good job, Mr. President, for stopping this war or that war, this war or that war. None of them did. I mean, like I said, I opened with how many of them are willing accomplices in this desire for their Davos's techno-feudal superstate. How many of them are willing accomplices in this and betraying their own people? And I think the big question that's in front of everybody now, if you watch the speech and you listen to Trump carefully, and you look at his body language and look at everything else, he's clearly saying it's time for the people to say enough is enough. We don't need to live like this anymore. As a matter of fact, we in America are not going to live like this anymore. That's what he said yesterday. Now, I'd like you all to come along with us and say, let's not live like this anymore. And if we do that, then all of the things that America is putting in place to improve America can be put in place for you as well. And we can all, not hold hands and sing kumbaya, but, we can carve up the world. We can, end the major conflicts and, negotiate the new areas of influence and borders, and we can move on with our lives and make the world a better place and rebuild what's been broken. And rebuild what's been bombed into the Stone Age. That includes parts of Ukraine, and it certainly includes Gaza and Syria and everything else.
Yeah. Okay. No, I did listen to the speech, and it's really funny that what he said, and then how the mainstream media, certainly in the UK, the Guardian, the Independent, and the BBC, are portraying it. But I want to go back to, and do want to move this on to money.
Sure.
This growing alliance that you're asserting between Russia, China, and the United States.
I wouldn't call it an alliance, but
This
an understanding.
informal arrangement,
Sure.
an understanding between them about how they're going to divide the world up. And something that you have said on my channel, and Alex Craner, who's also been a guest here, said, is
Yeah.
if you look at the world from the North Pole, it's from the North Pole, and then you see Russia, United States, and well, you don't quite see China. You see them bordering the Pacific. It looks very, very different, where you have these three large countries, Russia and United States, with lots of resources, manufacturing, China with manufacturing, all three of them with large populations, veritable economic and military superpowers to one degree or another, working together. And it drives the British and the Europeans crazy that they're going to get cut out. But how do you see this playing out in terms of the money markets?
Well,
and what's happening now?
Well, it's what has to happen now is, this is the hard part. The Europeans are horrifically in debt. Everybody talks about how much debt the United States is in. Yeah, but the United States has collateral. The United States has 350 million people or whatever. Get rid of the illegal immigrants. We're back down to 330, whatever. Fine. But we have all the resources you'd ever ask for. We have all the innovation you'd ever ask for. We're still, light years ahead of a lot of other countries in terms of certain technologies and everything else, and that we haven't even put on the table yet, right? Like, but at the same time, we have we're kind of like, it's like, there's let me put it to you this way. It's like the Taoist symbol of the goat. By the way, this is an interesting little digression, but I think you'll understand what I'm talking about. The United States is kind of like the Taoist interpretation of the goat, which is strong on the outside but weak on the inside. Meaning that the goat is incredibly strong and got hooves and horns and everything else, but internally is very susceptible to parasites and has a very weak, being a ruminant, has a very weak, very susceptible to internal parasites and internal problems. I think that kind of describes the United States at this moment in time. We have very weak internals. Like we have aging infrastructure and a fractious political situation, and we have debt that needs to be dealt with, and we have demographic problems in terms of the social safety net and all the rest of it. But at the same time, we've also brought those problems on ourselves. We've invited those parasites into our body politic and onto our balance sheet, all of which can be dealt with the proper disposition of Trump exercising his Article 2 powers as president, which he and Stephen Miller spent the first 9 months of his presidency getting the Supreme Court to redefine or remind everybody of, right? And that's what's happened. And now we're getting very close to that moment where that's going to fundamentally, where we're going to hit critical mass, where those definitions are going to be well defined, and it's going to allow Trump a free hand to do whatever he needs to do. And what he's been doing, and all of these injunctions and blocks and everything else are all going to go away. And Congress's role has been to just obstruct as much as possible and help this process along. Now, that being said, once he's clear with that, it's going to change everything. It's going to push capital towards the U.S. in a way that we haven't seen in years, or decades even. Because the United States still has the best legal framework for starting a business. It still has, you look at a U.S. where we're looking at half the regulations that we've ever, looking at a CFR, codified regulations, that's half the size that it currently is. And, tax cuts and regulatory cuts and everything else. It's going to start a bottom-up rebuilding of the immune system inside the parasite resistance to the United States, to extend the goat metaphor. That's the way I see things. And then what is that going to do to the markets? Well, clearly we're going to watch U.S. assets rise in value. Now the question is, how is that going to be managed in such a way that it doesn't cause rampant inflation and this and hot money inflows and all of that? And that's where we start getting into other aspects of what the United States is doing or needs to do. And I am not one of these people. The name of the thing may be gold, ghosts, and guns, but I'm not your typical gold bug, because I don't believe that the United States is fighting a higher gold price at this point. In this respect, Russia, China, and the United States are absolutely aligned. They all want a higher gold price. Why? Because, relative to the assets that are credit-based, that are dollar-based or yuan-based or ruble-based, which are all credit-based, their stock of gold and their stock of physical collateral is low. And that leverage ratio of total stock of credit-based the valuation of credit-based assets, which I would put like housing and the stock market and all of that, and even to a greater extent some of the obviously the debt markets as well. You have to put that against the actual physical stock gold and the current price of gold, and you go, these two things don't compute. That leverage ratio is still historically way too high. If it's 10-1 or 12-1, it's insane. A leverage ratio of 8-1. If a bank was levered 8-1 back, when I was a kid, and I'm 57 years old, that was considered, bank runnable. Like, are you kidding? 8-1? What do they have in the freaking minds? And now we tolerate 40-1. Like, it's just like nothing. Or have in the immortal words of Ellen Ripley, have IQs dropped sharply? You know what I mean? So even so something has to give. Either the value of the stock of the collateral has to rise, or the value of the credit-based assets that are represented by that collateral have to fall. And the big problem for politicians always is how to manage that scenario with the minimum amount of societal and social disruption, because a massive, deflationary depression of credit-based assets destroys a country for a generation or two, right? So that's what they're trying to do now, is they're trying to manage that such that we don't have that kind of deflation, and you just kind of let the inflation assets, the inflation of these assets, say housing prices in the United States, and a starter home in the U.S. is say $250,000. That becomes the new normal, but then you have to get wages up to be able to support that. With a 30-year note, fixed rate note at 5%. That's where these are the conversations that Scott Bessent and Jerome Powell have every Monday morning when they have breakfast. I'm dead serious. And if you can't see that at that point, I don't know what else to tell you. So what it means is that in the long run, gold is going to have to go higher. We're also going to need higher levels of financial transparency at the same time, in order to do away with the dark money that moves around, that finances basically the drug and child trafficking that's been done through the years, through the manipulation of bank secrecy rules and everything else. And people are going to be.
Tom?
This is one of the things I like, privacy. Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, Tom, we just lost you there. People are going to.
Yeah, I had a phone call come in, and I had to say no to it. So
right. Okay, well, look, I am, and I suspect many people here are familiar with your arguments, right?
Mm-hmm.
But in terms of what people's common understanding, because the mainstream media, which, as you know, and I know, we both agree, is always accurate and always tells the truth.
Of course.
What they say to us is that the dollar's going to crash because China's selling all its bonds and no one's going to want the dollar, and the US is toast.
Well, that's nice.
And also, if gold keeps going up, well, that's an indication of weakening in with the dollar.
Mm-hmm. Well, the dollar can go up against everybody else's currencies and still fall against gold. This is the part that nobody seems to understand. Like, it's a simplistic argument. Oh, the dollar is losing against gold, therefore the dollar is toast. Yeah, but have you looked at the dollar price of all the other currencies? Like, really? Okay. This is what's known as a secular bull market, right? A secular bull market in gold only happens when gold rises against the core currency of the world, the world's reserve or dominant trade currency. That's when you have a structural or secular bull market, where gold is rising independent of what all the other currencies are doing. Okay? This is the part that Martin Armstrong's made for years, and I agree with Marty about, and always have. And it took me a long time to internalize this argument, but when I finally did, well, I got news for you. One, all of my calls got better, and two, all of my analysis of how the world works got better, because I finally recognized, like everybody else, that my disappointment with my country, the United States, drifting from its mandate is not, that's a me problem. That's not necessarily mean that's not a global capital problem. Global capital still looks at the United States, looks at the dollar, and says, well, it says cleanest dirty shirt in the laundry. Got news for you, we're going to use it. That doesn't mean, though, that none of the stuff in the laundry doesn't mean that it's a clean shirt in the laundry by mistake. It's also dirty. It's just not as dirty as everybody else's shirt, and gold is still the cleanest, most pristine collateral for all of that. And so a secular bull market happens when gold breaks out in the core currency as well as everybody else's currency, and that's where we are now. And
Well, I'm just looking at the chart for pound against the dollar,
mhm,
and I think since mid 2023, the
mhm,
pound has been rising against the dollar, and I think
right,
for the last 6 months or so, it's been the euro's been rising against the dollar.
sure.
How does that fit?
Okay, so again, as you move through each stage of the process, okay, as we approach the repudiation of debt as a value, as a valid store of value, right? You're going to have if you're European and you're worried about the quality of your business tomorrow, you're worried about your job. What do you do with your money? Do you pull it out of if you've got it in German bunds, say you've got or you've got money in the DAX, in a DAX index fund or whatever, right? What do? You pull the money out and you go to cash. What happens when you go to cash? You're buying euros, and relatively speaking, when people go to cash, it's always the first thing that happens on the precipice of a currency problem, is that the currency goes up, and then it goes down, and it goes down hard. The first thing everybody does is goes to cash, and that could last for however long it's going to last. And we saw the same thing back in 2010, 2000, 2008. The first time that gold broke $1,000, I remember sitting there when it broke $1,000, hit 1033 on a Monday morning, and then something happened. I don't remember what, and then people started selling gold. Why? Because the 2008 financial crisis started to get really pick up steam, and we started to hit, the bank liquidation phase and everything else, right? What happened? Gold dropped $400, $350 over the course of the next 6 months, from 1033 to a low of 670 during the height of the financial crisis. Why? Because people sold gold to buy dollars. Why? Because they needed dollars. Because when they have liabilities that they have to meet, they got to pay their electric bill, they got to pay their credit revolver, they got to pay their car loan, they got to pay this, they got to pay that. They need their currency. So, and then there's a little bit of other stuff going on, and I suspect, and I'm not going to sit here with receipts or anything, but I firmly believe as well that Scott Bessent over at Treasury has been running a weak dollar policy, which is what Donald Trump wants. Okay, he's running a weak dollar policy on purpose in order to undergird and give Trump negotiating leverage in the trade deals. Because if you want to claw back what you feel is unearned wealth and an unfair trade advantage, which exists both through currency arbitrage, through the relative values of the currencies, and the non-tariff based barriers that have been put in place, which are effectively tariffs. They just don't call them tariffs, excluding American goods from the market, and therefore excluding, and creating a durable trade surplus, which is what Europe has had against the United States for years. Then the way you fix that is and you want to negotiate a trade deal. What do? You want to put tariffs on, which raises the cost of doing business with the exporting country, and you also want to doubly punish them by weakening your currency, because now it's a stronger currency trying to export into a weaker currency market. Plus, you've got to pay the tariff. Those two things together have actually strengthened the United States negotiating hand, which is why Ursula von der Leyen, had to in July sign the most lopsided trade deal I've ever seen. Yes. And she didn't even try. She had no leverage, and so Trump and company were okay with a weaker dollar. So again, we're talking tactics versus strategy versus long-term capital flows. At the same time, we're looking at the data coming out of the United States, and every day you're going to get a different piece of information. Some days the information is going to be good, some days it's going to be bad. Why? Well, it's because the United States is now an economy that's undergoing reorganization. And when you're undergoing reorganization, there's going to be conflicting data, both labor data and production data and PPI data and this data and that data. And everybody will be able to pick a piece of data that will fit their thesis of whether good dollar, bad dollar, every day. I watch Twitter every freaking day, and everybody just picks data that fits their pre-existing notion. Like Peter Schiff will only pick dollar, bearish stuff, and they'll ignore all the dollar bullish stuff, because that's who he is. Your focus determines your reality, right? So sit here and I'm not saying that my focus doesn't determine my reality. What I'm trying to say is I'm trying to step back and look at the whole picture as best as I can and say, no, there's some good, there's some bad. It's stagflation. We got to reorganize the economy. Data's going to be mixed, but the general policy is it's all going to be in the long run good for the American producer and or the American consumer. Some of these moves that Trump is making, has made, and will make are extreme, and they have to be because he took over a country in a perilous state, and so there's no getting around that, right? You have to accept the fact that yeah, he's making some really like insane moves, but
Yeah.
only because the situation that he inherited was insane because the Biden junta was run by a bunch of vandals that literally hated the country. And so now you have to you have to overcorrect in the opposite direction. But the other thing he also pointed out against all odds, and now Jerome Powell even agrees with him, and I secretly suspect that Jerome Powell always agreed with him, which is that tariffs aren't going to be inflationary in the long run. And the most compelling argument for tariffs not being inflationary in the long run, thereby undoing a great amount of my Austro-libertarian brethren's arguments about tariffs, is that they're not inflationary because they don't create money. All they do is reorganize. All they do is rebalance where the money's flowing. The existing stock of money is flowing. There is no quote unquote quantity theory of money argument at play here because the amount of the money supply and the money demand, all we're doing is shifting the demand curve, but it's the same stock of money. Like I didn't see anybody printing new dollars in order to, you know what I mean? Like it's not like the Bank of Thailand can go out and print dollars in order to pay the tariff. They can't. We control that, right? And this is why I also argued for years why Powell raising interest rates as hard as he did was designed to limit the amount of dollars offshore that could be printed through credit creation by raising the cost of dollars in the open market on the global market. And that's what's happened. And now we're living in the aftershocks of that. And, the next phase of this is going to be a rush of capital into the United States. And the question is, will the U.S. be able to capture that capital in such a way that it doesn't put huge upward pressure on prices throughout the existing supply chains? That's going to be the trick. And I don't know that Trump and company can pull it off. I don't have a good answer for that, but I know that that's what they're trying to do. So they're trying to figure out ways of creating heat sinks within the economy to absorb those dollars so that they are then pushed out into the economy in ways that are constructive and not destructive. Because what you don't want is hot money flows, right? And hot money flows basically say, well, the dollars, my currencies, my euros are strong, my dollars are weak. Hey, I know what I'll do. I'll buy a condo. I'm a German. I'll buy condos in Marco Island, Florida. This is what we saw in 2005, 2006. And I'm now going on like purely personal history here, where a German investor bought my mom's condo at the top of the market. And it's what actually kept my mom alive. During her final years, she finally was able to cash out completely. And it's what her estate wound up being. 90% of her estate was the sale of that condominium, right? And she top-ticked the market, literally top-ticked the market. And I told this story before, but it's an example of what hot money flows look like. They didn't buy that apartment. That German couple or investor didn't buy that apartment because, they wanted an apartment on Marco Island. They bought it because they thought it was going to go to they bought it for $365. They thought it was going to go to $500,000. And then when the dollar strengthened during the financial crisis, when everybody rushed into dollars and they got crushed. And they probably sold the thing and got out. So money moves in, money moves out. And what you want to do is you want the money to move in, capture it, invest it in such a way that the thing grows internally. And that's what Trump is trying to do now. And that's why every one of the trade deals that he negotiated over the summer came with a blank check investment profile that he controls effectively to invest in America. So not only did they set the tariff rate, but he also said, and Japan's going to invest $500 billion in the United States over the next 10 years. And I control how that check is going to get written, not the Bank of Japan, not, you know what I mean? That's different. We've never seen this before. Okay. We've never seen this before. This is very, very, this is unique, at least as far as I know. I mean, if somebody in the audience or somebody listening to my voice, is telling me that this is not unique, great. I'm all ears, drop me comments in the Twitter feed. I'll be happy to listen to it. But as far as I
Well,
understand, this has never happened before.
yeah, well, I've never known this in the time that I've been following politics. Um, and certainly the time you and I have been recording and talking
Mm-hmm.
together.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I think on your Twitter feed, there's a comment from Jay Powell yesterday that something like
Mm-hmm.
$400 billion a month are moving in because of the tariffs. Inflation hasn't gone up because of the retailers and the importers are eating the costs.
Yes.
And then it seems like I hear noises from you and Alex and Promethean Action that what he's moving towards is, and I think he may have even hinted at this, at getting rid of the income tax, certainly for
Mm-hmm.
lower wage earners,
Mm-hmm.
and using tariffs to fund
Yeah.
government spending.
Yeah. Well, I think two things are at play here, Rich. The first is that it's not 300, 400, 300 or 400 billion a month. If it was that much, like the budget is, we don't have any budget problems, but it's 30 to 40 billion dollars a month. So it's 300 to 400 billion a year, right? Trump was left with a 1.7 trillion dollar roughly annual deficit, which is going to go away tomorrow. Like the one big beautiful bill just got rescored by the Congressional Budget Office. They were off by 11 or only 11 orders of magnitude. Further, confirming the validity of all government statistics. Oh my God. Now, as opposed to a $3.5 trillion deficit over 10 years is going to generate somewhere around $300 billion in profit or, budget surplus. I don't believe either of those numbers. I don't really care. I just know that both numbers are nonsense. I'd actually just as easily believe it'll produce $3.5 trillion worth of surplus. I just don't buy any of it. But what's important to understand is that I know that we have not seen the lion's share of the cutting of government spending that can occur, and that's already been identified as needs to be gotten rid of, and we wouldn't even notice it. Because most of this money goes, the rest of the world will see it because that money's not going into their coffers, because most of this money goes offshore. And I've said that before, why don't we just stop spending money overseas and it won't have any, we can fix the budget and it won't have any effect on the domestic GDP because, well, that money's not being spent overseas, right? So the money's all being spent overseas. So what Trump is doing, or what I think he's moving towards, is figuring out how to balance the budget, come up with other forms of revenue, both from dividends off all the assets he puts in the sovereign wealth fund, like his 10% stake in Intel, and now I think the lithium company he announced yesterday. I don't remember quite the name of it. I know that Fannie and Freddie relist and is a part of this. That these are means by which to build an asset portfolio that will offset a lot of government spending, and then slowly but surely pay down the debt. As the boomers age out, the unfunded liabilities of Social Security and Medicaid go away. Those get reformed. We get rid of the fraud. We get rid of the waste. How much of Social Security, how much of Medicaid that we're paying out every month is going to illegal immigrants, people who are dead, fraud, waste, all the rest of it. Let's start there, and then let's really get a better assessment of how much money the United States, how big the United States budget deficit is. And I would probably argue that it's a lot. It's actually in surplus if we get rid of all that money. I'm being honest with you. I really do think we waste in excess of $2.5 to $3 trillion a year. That's what I think. I may be wrong about that. The number may only be 2 trillion, but I'm going with 2.5 to 3 trillion. And that if we can get rid of 1.8 or 1.9, well, then we don't need to tax the lower income stratas in the United States because that portion of the income tax doesn't bring in much money. Its budget does. Like
Right.
90% of income taxes are paid by the top 50% of wage earners, and 50% of all income taxes are paid by the top 10% of wage earners. We do have a progressive income tax in the United States. And so removing the income tax burden from anybody, say from a married couple making less than 150 grand a year, aside from the fact that they don't have to file a 1040 and perjure themselves before the IRS every April, and it would unburden the American economy because now accountants, we probably pay. I think the last estimate I saw that the American economy generates paying the income tax costs $500 billion. It only brings in 4.4 trillion. It's an SG&A cost to administer the income tax is 12%. How about we just not? And I'll bet you 90% or half of that cost is probably on earners that don't even generate 5% of the income tax in the first place. So it doesn't make any sense to even continue the system, right? In that respect, get rid of that, and there's another $250 billion in net loss, where now all the accountants can be doing the work that they should be doing, which is helping businesses figure out how to, grow their business and doing proper financial analysis, as opposed to processing fucking income taxes. Pardon my French. Like this
Yes.
is right. This is the thing I think that nobody wants to, really wants to drill down onto. Like there's so many secondary and tertiary and quaternary benefits, second, third, fourth order effects of getting rid of the income tax on the lower 50% of wage earners in America that would be off the charts. And then we have things like Ron DeSantis in Florida, and I've made this, I'm going whole hog here. Like Ron DeSantis in Florida wanting to do away with property taxes for primary residences is another. It's a kind of a foundational and philosophical thing. People shouldn't have to pay rent to the government to live. Like that's just wrong. And that's again, that goes back to something that Ian Burlingame talks about, and I'm seeing it in a lot of the discussion of surrounding getting rid of property tax. It goes back to the invasion of England by William the Conqueror, and then putting that system in place. So this is 1,000 years in the making of ending, land feudalism, financial feudalism to the king. Like the hell with that shit. We don't need to be living like this, and we can demand that we don't. And the system has been pushed into such imbalance that it would be easy for us to do it relative to the numbers that we're talking about. Okay. And it would be an immense uplift of, and how much capital would that open up from the lower end of the economic strata, right? To then rebuild the societal immune system from the ground up.
Yeah.
Going back to my original goat metaphor. Sorry, Rich, go ahead.
Okay. Tom, I'm going to make a comment, and then I'm going to ask you a question. We've got about 10 minutes left. We finish on the hour. So one, I imagine that Trump's plan is to get this in place ideally before the midterms next year. And then if not, certainly perhaps by July, when the US celebrates its 250th celebration. What a great gift that would be to the American people, like no income tax for lower earners. And it would leave, bye-bye Democratic Party. They'll be gone for Lord knows how many years if he pulls this off.
Yes.
But now, given that this is a cryptocurrency news website, in the time we've got left, what do you see about Trump's policies with regards to Bitcoin, Ripple, Ethereum, cryptocurrencies in general?
So I think that we're moving away from central banks. The era of central banking is going to evolve into something new. Saw something this morning from my friend, good friend Vince Lanchi about the BIS and Enbridge and China and the and gold. And I need to actually speak to Vince about this because he's been focusing on this far more than I have recently. So I'm a little behind on some of this stuff. But I'll say this. Clearly, what we're moving towards is a world post-SWIFT and post-central banks in many ways, where the central banks are at the center of control over the currencies. And I think the stable coins certainly play into this. The stablecoin bill clearly plays into this, and the ability of small and regional banks to issue localized debt on localized stablecoins that to the retail and person using them, but they will look like dollars, but they won't actually be dollars as issued by the Fed or by the Treasury. Have been issued by the local banks. These will be the hot sinks that I'm talking about, of how this capital will come in from overseas or come in and be able to keep that money locally within that economy and build that economy out locally based on the demands, the supply and demand of capital. Demand for capital, and they'll have their own local interest rates, and the SOFR markets, the secured overnight financing markets, will give everybody a good benchmark as to what the cost of capital should or should not be, and how that plays itself out. So we'll be moving towards a more decentralized system for the cost of capital, and crypto has a massive role to play in alleviating that bottleneck of getting people direct access to the capital they need to start a business. The bigger problem, and something I've personally been running into, and I know a lot of other small business owners, every time I talk about this issue, they come out of the woodwork telling me, "Oh my God, it's worse than even you're running into," which is that we have a regulatory system for getting capital and getting access to primary mortgages and everything else that are all downstream of Dodd-Frank and Sarbox and all the other stuff that makes it nearly impossible for small business owners to actually get access to capital in a reasonable manner because of the way the regulations have been determined to work by both the Fed and the now defunct CFPB, the Consumer Finance Protection Bureau, which is effectively Elizabeth Warren's fiefdom to ruin the country. And all of that is ending. And that's why that woman is like literally losing her mind and turning into like the quintessential Karen. And it's hilarious to watch. But that being said, I mean, Bitcoin has a role to play as pristine collateral within these markets. Like I firmly believe this. The same with gold. Gold will get tokenized and utilized this way, but Bitcoin's already there. Payment chains are going to, the payment chains are going to be fought for on both Ethereum and Ripple and any other network that's out there. And I welcome that competition. I've talked about Ripple. I think Ripple's being blessed by the various governments. Therefore, I'm putting my money there, as a speculative bet and telling that I'm not pro or con any of these things outside of Bitcoin. At the end of the day, I'm a proof of work maxi. I've always said this. So, but I'm just reading the room, and people don't like it when I read the room. But that's the way it is. So I think they all have a part to play, and they're all critically undervalued if we're moving all of that capital onto these systems to move around and that liquidity onto these systems. And clearly they're going to all have to rise in value in order, again, to create collateral within the system that justifies the current pricing regime. Going back to what I said earlier about the leverage ratio of credit-based assets versus the stock of gold. Like, add those other assets in, add the crypto assets that are also playing in that same space in to that statement, and now you have a perfectly analogous, or you have a more complete picture of what I'm talking about. I don't think we're going to see a crash in real estate. I don't think we're going to see a crash in equity prices. What I do see is over time that equity prices are going to rise slowly, but PDEs are going to fall faster. That's what I think is going to happen in the United States. So that we have a silver PDE on the S&P 500 that's like in nosebleed territory in the 40s, or just shy of 40. I can see with what's being done right now and the changes that are being made both at the regulatory level and a tax level and everything else, I can see the silver PDE coming down faster back into the 30s and the low 20s and high 20s, while the Dow grinds from 46,000 to 55,000, and everybody will still be complaining that the Dow's in a bubble, right? But that's not the case. It's the bubble is deflating slowly as PDEs come down. Remember also that the Shiller PDE is based on inflation adjusted earnings. So what you're seeing in the spike in the Shiller PDE is a function of the amount of inflation that we've already had, and now we're moving into a stagflationary environment. So will we have a lot of inflation going forward here? I don't think so. And price inflation, I think we're going to have wage inflation, not price inflation. I think that's what's going to happen. But again, I may be wrong about this stuff. You're going to salt all this analysis to taste. Okay.
All right. Then a very quick answer is required for this one.
Mm-hmm.
And then we're going to finish up, okay?
Mm-hmm.
When altcoin season?
After Bitcoin gets out of this current zone between 105 and 120. Bitcoin's got to go to 150, 175, and then there'll be a rotation. And then if there's going to be an altcoin season, it's going to happen after that.
All right. Can't wait. Tom, anything you want to say before we finish up, and also remind people where they can find you?
Sure. One, thank you. That was fun. And I tried to keep it as clean as possible because I know you don't like it when I go. Well, I know, but in this particular, I wasn't actually in the mood to go go crazy today. One, thank you for the opportunity to speak to everybody. As always, I really appreciate it. I see some of the names that are in the audience. I see some people there, and I'm like, hello to all the regulars. I do appreciate it. Of course, I truly appreciate all the support that people have given me over the years. And of course, you can follow me on X here at 1728 TFL 1728, Patreon/Gold Ghosts and Guns. The newsletter is not very expensive, folks. I think we drive an unbelievable amount of value every month. So
yes, indeed. And I'm going to be listening to your newsletter, which you posted before we started.
Mm.
So sorry,
the market report. The market report.
The market report. Yeah, you do on Wednesdays and Sundays, so I should be listening to that today. So Tom, thank you. It's always a delight having you on, and look forward to having you on, because you'll be on in a few weeks' time with Alex Grainer and Susan Kokinda from Promethean Action, and we'll be talking more politics there.
Well, and she and I, and actually, Rich, just to remind everybody, and she and I will be speaking tomorrow for the episode 232 of the Gold Ghosts and Guns podcast. We're going to record tomorrow.
Oh,
so
fabulous. I look forward to that. So please do follow Tom. Please also follow the Coin Republic. Really, really appreciate it. Thank you very much. This is Crypto Rich and Tom and the Coin Republic signing out. All the best. Bye-bye.